I mentioned that I have a new, I guess, grandniece,
Oh.
and it turns out she was born with a little hole in her heart. So, which is like, a thing that happens. She's seems to be totally fine. Uh, but I thought I might sort of dedicate our practice tonight to little Ellen. Both her grandmothers are named Ellen. So, they decided to name her Ellen. She looks pretty cute too. Um, but it's interesting, the we don't sort of ascribe, I don't know, you know, I, this so-called Buddhist doesn't ascribe exactly to uh, like intercessionary prayer when you ask God to do particular stuff, but I also still like to pray at times, but it's just that I'm not praying to some being. I'm praying more to the universe, I guess, or in the hopes that the power of love will have a positive effect, that somehow that will touch the universe. And sort of the idea that like maybe the combined power of a bunch of people sending thoughts of healing maybe has some effect. It's at least a comforting thing to think. So I'll drop a little of that into the sit tonight. So here we are, back in March again. Remember March? Yes, here it is again. Um, but it certainly feels a lot more hopeful than last March. So I hope everybody is still safe and not afflicted by ice storms, and at least maybe getting closer to immunity, if not having reached immunity. So let's sit. So this class officially runs for an hour, though we often run over, and we sit for 20 minutes to start, and I'll give some meditation instruction to get us going. So beginning by feeling how your body is situated, how you're holding your body, your posture, whether it's balanced, comfortable. And it's helpful to sit upright if that's not too difficult for you or painful. As we delve into a meditation practice, we start to learn things about our body, how we hold it habitually, where we tend to get tight or tense, where it's comfortable. So just taking some time to Scan through the sensations in your body. What stands out? What immediately stands out? What do you notice when you turn towards your body? Also, it can be interesting just to notice what parts of your body you don't really feel, which ones you don't notice. Just scanning for that. And then noticing too any sounds in your environment. What are you hearing? And then the more subtle aspect of the emotional experience. This doesn't always get addressed in meditation, but it's really helpful to acknowledge whatever mood is present. And then arriving at the breath, just feeling the body breathing, noticing the sensations wherever they are easiest for you to feel, wherever they seem most natural, like at the nostrils or the belly or the chest. Let the attention gather at one point in the body with the breath. So we say rest with the breath, a sense of coming to a place of calm, of peace, where you can rest. The mind will wander, drift off into thoughts. Oh, when you notice that, just acknowledge the thought and then come back to the breath. It's helpful to notice if there is some internal dialogue about thoughts. So when we're striving in our meditation, there's a tendency to be frustrated or annoyed about having thoughts. So when we react negatively to noticing that we're thinking, this just adds another layer of energy, counterproductive energy. So we try to learn to keep the process very simple. We realize that thoughts are natural, and we actually see that we don't control the mind. We're, in a sense, trying to develop some more control to train the mind. But it still is so deeply conditioned to go off into thinking that no matter how much we do, it still seems to happen. That understanding implies that we should be forgiving of ourselves, not judgmental of ourselves. Further, when we see how thoughts lead us into stress, emotional agitation, we can also respond to that with compassion. So this is a shift in orientation rather than an attitude of striving and self-judgment. It's an attitude of acceptance, kindness towards ourselves. Perhaps this is the training, not training to control our mind, but rather training to be accepting and kind towards the mind. As we develop these qualities and these attitudes, this is when we find that meditation becomes much more easeful, ceases to be such a struggle. It's not that we've somehow attained some great concentration or grand insight, or that we've attained emptiness, but rather that we've changed how we respond to what arises, to whatever states are there, so that even when concentration or insight, emptiness arise, that even that doesn't disturb us. This just becomes another thing to see and to accept. So now, if you feel so inclined, turn your mind towards a 2-week-old baby girl in Boise, Idaho, with a tiny hole in her heart, sending healing to that heart. May she be healthy. May her heart heal. May she grow to be wise and compassionate, a gift to all of us. Thank you. So just not to be too dramatic, just to let you know that this grandniece, the prognosis is very, very good. Like, they often these things actually heal themselves, or if not, there's, a pretty common surgery that takes care of it. So there's not a ton of worry about it, but it's nice to send a prayer to a child. Um, so thank you. Um, hmm, I was reading something from Joseph Goldstein this week on right view. I'm actually giving uh, I'm kind of doing a monthly visit to the Napa Valley Insight Group, and um, because one of their teachers is on sabbatical, and so they asked me if I wanted to kind of cover for him once a month over the next like 6 or so months, and so I said I'd like to do a series on the Noble Eightfold Path, and so I started and talking about right view, and that got me sort of thinking more and reading more about right view, which is kind of one of my favorite topics. And right view is it's a Buddhist term. It's the first element or first factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, and it has some uh, fairly specific meanings, but it also has this sort of more general meaning of sort of seeing things the way they are, like you know, being realistic in a way, um, not deluding ourselves. But the thing that stood out for me as I was reading Joseph's take on it, Joseph Goldstein has a great book just called Mindfulness, has a subtitle. I guess it's over there. So anyway, I won't get it. But if you're looking for like a really comprehensive Dharma book, that's really one of the best. And he talks about part of right view is seeing um, the idea of not self uh, and the this classical Buddhist teaching, anatta, uh, and one of the ways that it's talked about in the suttas is uh, he says that the Buddha says that essentially that the illusion of self is created by the uh, sort of interaction of these five factors called the five aggregates, and it's it's and at a certain point in the sutras, when he's talking about suffering, he also says that suffering is that the five aggregates are suffering, which is interesting too. But what struck me as I was reading about this, and I've looked at this teaching in the five aggregates, and I'll go through them for you in a minute. But um, what struck me about them, I realized that the way that I talk about working with difficult emotions, particularly with depression, is essentially taking apart the five aggregates, because so the five aggregates give you this feeling that there's a self. And so the aggregates are form, so body, feeling, which is like the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral experience of sense experience, perception, which is the naming and labeling quality, mental or volitional formations, which here it starts to get, there's different ways of talking about this and different sort of opinions of what that means. Bhikkhu Bodhi talks about this as kind of the motivation or the impulse, the intention that comes out of our experience of the other aggregates. Joseph talks about it more as mental formations. It's like the mind states and emotional states that arise. And then there's consciousness, and consciousness is the aggregate that's really the least clearly explained, other than just to say that we have ear consciousness, eye consciousness, nose consciousness, mouth consciousness, uh, body consciousness, and mind consciousness, so that every sense, including the mind as a sense, has a kind of when we're experiencing something through that sense, then we're having that consciousness. So I'll put that aside for a moment, or maybe for good, uh, and go back to this idea that how this connects with how I talk about working with emotions. Um, so when and this is very much through my own experience of working with this, and something that I developed, and I don't know, developed, but it came together for me, that it just really struck me that, wow, it's really interesting that this was like what I was doing in this sort of intuitive way was actually a classical Buddhist teaching. So the form, the body, the first aggregate is just, yeah, you've got this body. So out of that, what arises out of that are feelings that show up. So when that feeling arises, if it's unpleasant, we label it. That's the third aggregate. Whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, we label it. So at that point, the feeling that might be unpleasant, just an unpleasant feeling, gets a name. And if you've conditioned yourself to, like, I have these kind of feelings and this is what they are. We've habitually said this feeling is depression or this feeling is anxiety, then that solidifies that experience and actually starts to create, it starts to expand the experience, because it starts to do a feedback loop, because at that point, this mental formation arises, the fourth aggregate, which is the story, right? There's a feeling, I've got a label for it. Now I'm going to run with it. Oh, I'm gonna build on it. This, like, sets off this chain of experiences, which is, I'm depressed, I'm always depressed, I was depressed last year, I'm gonna be depressed next year, or whatever your story is. And that then becomes this, um, comprehensive experience, and because now when you have that story, it sets off another feeling. This is why the aggregates aren't separate, right? They're all together. The story sets off another feeling, and the feeling sets up is gets identified again. Oh, there's more of that. Oh, this is worse. It's another, and the mental formation grows. And so now we move into this. This is how I can think about consciousness, that now it's not just that I'm having this experience in this moment. It's that this is the world. This is my world right now. It's in my body, it's in my mind, it's in my feelings. It's and there's a story that's on loop, so there's no escaping it. So the Buddha has very specific instructions, and they happen to be the ones that that I give on this for this. Ah, notice that a feeling is just a feeling, and realize that the label, the name you give it, is actually something additional. The feeling doesn't come with a name, right? It's just a feeling. It's like the baby that's born, comes out, doesn't have a name. It's just this organism. There's a feeling. So instead of naming it and identifying with it, because right, so that there's three things, the three characteristics are associated with this. We have the feeling that it's permanent, it's painful, and it's me. So that's the opposite of the three characteristics. The three characteristics are its impermanence. Well, it's painful. That is actually, this characteristic is the same. But it's impermanent. It's the pain is impermanent. And it's not me. That's just a story. That's something that I'm adding on to it. And if I'm able to, in that moment, realize, oh, this feeling is just a feeling. It's not me, and it's not permanent. Because those two parts of the story are the ones that build the fear of permanent pain is one of the things that makes us obsess about our difficult emotions. And so if we can remind ourselves, if we can bring this wisdom factor in that sees, oh, this is unpleasant. It's dukkha. I see that, but it's not permanent. It's just energy that's moving. And it's really not who I am. Like, it's easy to say, like, I am a depressive, right? That's who I am. Or I am an anxious person. I am an angry person. Or, it could be, you could have a positive. Some people might. So this is, it's, interesting that this process, which can look, when you look at the five aggregates, okay, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, consciousness, it's kind of technical. And it's not that intuitively grasped necessarily. But when we start to break it down and see it in our own experience and see how we interact with it and realize, oh yeah, that is how I create the idea of me. That's how the story of me happens. There's these feelings, there's the labels, and a lot of the times the labels that we put on things are things that other people told us, right? When you were a kid or at some point in your life. Oh, you're kind of, you're just fat, like, or what, right? I mean, I was got the when I was a kid, it was like, "You're really skinny," and people would make fun of my legs, you know? Thanks. So I didn't wear shorts until I was about 60, you know? Uh, so we get that stuff, right? There's a label, there's a thing, there's the experience, there's this label that makes it more real. And then all that grows out of that, what does that trigger? And then it becomes this world of who we are. So this is really one of the key ways to spiritual awakening or to enlightenment is to see through this creation, the idea that these aggregates define me, that they are not I, they are not me, they are not mine. As a George Harrison song, I, Me, Mine, is on the Let It Be album, if you want to hear it. So I actually, on one retreat I was on, I was studying this, and I started doing a practice, a reflective practice. I should probably teach it. The reason I don't teach it is because I'm kind of lazy. That's like, now what I just did there was I labeled something. That was a perception. It was totally an interpretation. Uh, and in any case, I don't generally teach it. I will say this, I shy away from very structured practices and sort of directive practices, but let me share this with you a little bit. So at some point, and let's just do it now. Let's just sit back for a moment and close your eyes and notice what you're feeling. Like you could identify it as a mood or it could be a sensation. And just say to yourself, this feeling is not me. It does not belong to me. It is not mine. And I am not this feeling. This feeling is impermanent. See if you can feel its impermanence. That is to say, its kind of energetic or dynamic nature. This feeling is not satisfactory. It won't bring me satisfaction. Notice if there's a name for the feeling. If there's a name that you give it, and acknowledge that that name is constructed and conditioned. So you can start to take apart different experiences in this way to notice, oh, this is just body, this is just form, or that's just a name, or that's just a mental formation, that is just a mood or a state. It is not permanent, it is not me, it is not mine. We often talk in the Buddhist world about this idea that there is, well, people say there's no self, but the Buddha really says, it points to different things and says they are not self. So rather than there's no self, it's like, where is the self? And so this is the way, a classic way to sort of see that, not as something theoretical, but to see, oh, that's right. Like, I just create this idea of I out of these experiences. You know, if I don't have, if I didn't have these different experiences, I wouldn't be able to construct this idea. But it then gives you a way in to like in the moment, like break out of that instead of, getting lost. Like, or maybe I should say, when you are lost, when you snap out of it to go, oh, what was how was I creating self right there? You know, and what was that process by which I did that? So this isn't meant to be theoretical at all, but to be very practical. Like you can use it to like break out of that spell when it's working against you. And of course, we're not going to do it like, you know, be on top of this 24/7, but in those moments when there's, like, wow, I'm really stuck in this place, like to just stop and go, oh, that's a feeling with the label, with the mind state, and it's all just feeding each other. It doesn't have to do that. It's what's one of the remarkable things about insight is how we can bring insight into a felt experience and actually, um, well, I mean, we would say let go, but it's not quite how I think of the experience. That it's almost like you kind of pry yourself away from the suffering. You kind of the insight is able to separate the experience from the experiencer. And we kind of are able to go, oh, and so it's as I say, it's not theoretical. It starts as theoretical, but when we bring it into this contemplative mode, we can break ourselves out very intentionally. So, whereas, one way to break out of stuck states is to just breathe and be mindful. But another way is to very intentionally bring in wisdom. So this is one of the purposes in studying the Dharma is that meditating alone doesn't necessarily melt down those, you know, stuck places or melt down those difficult states. Sometimes does, but sometimes we can be even when meditating, sometimes even more when we're meditating, that we can get stuck in a loop, and so that like to have a framework of like, oh, wait, what's happening right now, and to catch ourselves and then remember, oh wait, how am I supposed to think about this? That can then be this shift of orientation. One of the things we talk about when we teach meditation is that we're not trying to uh, teach people how to stop thinking, but for them to change their relationship to their thoughts. So this is what we're talking about in terms of that relationship. Our ordinary relationship to our thoughts is my thoughts are me. My thoughts are information. My thoughts are facts. My thoughts are things that I am inside of. There's no like outside. But when we realize like, oh, wait, there's another way to get this, then this is like the magic of Dharma and the magic of shifted um, awareness of discovering that awareness can actually observe and can step back from that which we are experiencing. And when we do that, we're able to actually make choices, right? So this is like we have choices today. It's one of my favorite AA expressions, that we can actually choose to look at our experience differently. It doesn't necessarily mean it's gonna like fix it immediately, but it very often it's kind of like coming out of a spell. There's the Buddha uses this word for this advanced state, this state like on the way to awakening, disenchantment. Disenchantment is I love that term. And it's very much when we come into recovery, we become disenchanted. If you're an alcoholic, you become disenchanted with alcohol, which means it doesn't have a spell on you anymore, right? The disenchantment means that you were enchanted, and and I think of that not as just enchanted, like you love something, but that actually you're in you're under a spell, and you're under the spell of drugs, you're under the spell of alcohol, you're under the spell of food or sex or gambling. And it's very much like that, because when we're in that state, we we can't see any other reality. We can't imagine another reality. Like, so this is the only reality we know, because we're under that spell. And then disenchantment is like that uh, moment of clarity. Oh, whoa, whoa, what was that? What was that dream I was just in? You know, whoa, wow, that was crazy. What was I thinking? Then we step out of that and we realize, oh, wow, it's a lot better out here in reality than it is in that spell I was in. So, that's one of the reasons I like, addiction is such a really a metaphor for the trap of dukkha in general, the the problem of dukkha that the Buddha talks about, that we're caught in this spell of believing in self and believing in impermanence, believing that we can control things, and that there's some satisfaction that we can wrest from the world, that we can get enough money or whatever, power or fame, or have a perfect meditation that then will fix us. And that spell, we break out of that spell. It's like, oh, okay. And of course the greatest paradox is that it's the things that we thought were freeing us, or that were going to free us or bring us happiness, that turn out not to be the things that have us trapped. And just like with alcohol, right? We think that if we can just become, have enough self-esteem and power and control, if everybody loves me, if I become a superstar, then I'll be happy, right? Inflate my ego so it's big enough for the whole world. That will fix me. And we realize, no, get rid of that thing, And that's why you really have to feel sorry for people who are, famous, because they're like, uh, if they get lost in that, because they so lost. And although some of them have that breakthrough, and you see that actually frees them, they get through it, they realize, oh, right, no, the disenchantment comes. So interesting. To This is what I enjoy doing, which is combining like a classical Buddhist teaching with something very, uh, our direct experience. So, a few minutes for people to chime in, if you would like. You can just unmute yourself or do anything that you enjoy doing. Jim Carrey had an awakening. I did not know that, but thank you, Dana. Tell me more. No? Okay, another time. Oh, thank you. Wow. we're getting a lot of information here. I don't know how Angela types so fast, but she's let us know that what is that? Oh, Spirit Rock is next Friday, right? So that's good. So instead of here, I'll be there. Same chair, different Zoom. My 10% happier. Yes, thank you. People are saying it's very good. Many people have said I have not listened to it. Can't bear to. All my previous classes are on YouTube, many of them. And then where's the thing about giving me money? Come on, where's that? Must be in there somewhere. If you want to give Donna, there's an opportunity for that. Don't forget the money. There's a great song, Mojo Nixon. I'm sure, I don't know. Does anybody know who Mojo Nixon is? Just raise your hand if you know. Mojo Nixon was this like acoustic punk rocker from LA in the 80s. I worked at the record company he was on. He had a song called Where the Hell's My Money? And it was about like it was a musician song, right? At the end of the week, the club owner doesn't want to pay you, and he'd be like, where the hell's my money? So anyway, I don't, that's not what this Buddhism thing is about. So just thought I'd toss that in just for humor's sake. So come on, somebody say something. Or I'm going to start quoting more Mojo Nixon songs.
No Nirvana without Donna.
Okay, good.
Hi, Kevin. This is David.
Hi, David.
I'm recently spending a lot of energy and time in trying to understand things that trigger me in terms of traumas from the past coming up and not really understanding what's going on, how I'm feeling. And I'm sort of confused in terms of hearing you say something, I might be wrong, about not identifying what I'm feeling in terms of that. I understand this idea of that isn't a permanent state. What I'm feeling, that isn't me. But I do try to figure out, well, what is it? That seems like a contradiction. I was wondering if I'm getting that wrong, or if you could help explain that. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, David, because it's a really important distinction to make. That it's essentially one of the kind of paradoxes that we find in Buddhism, which is that we have to deal with the constructed self and find some healing and some, I guess, peace with acceptance, as well as understanding of that construction. Like, as you say, like past trauma, the conditioning that brought us to where we are. And because if we don't have that, any clarity around that, then we're still playing out those conditioned habits. And we all have wounds, we all have wounds from the past that we have to find ways to live with. The saying is, you have to have a self before you can let go of yourself, the self. It's just, a little bit, maybe too much shorthand, but it gets at the idea that we need to deal with the psychological level of self and have some balance, clarity, maturity, I guess is like one word, I know, for it. Integration is a good term for it. And as we do that, we can also hold it in this other way and have this other way to reflect on it. So that when we do find ourselves going so far down that, getting so triggered that we're kind of not able to nothing constructive is happening, that we can kind of step back and go, okay, this is painful, this is difficult, and it's impermanent, and it's not really me. So I don't have to, for me, that thing about it's not me is about sort of not blaming me. Like there's not some flaw in me that makes it this way. And again, it's stepping in that universal understanding that everybody suffers, and it just we all suffer in our unique and individual ways, but it's all comes out of the same process. So absolutely, you need to do all that personal work, and that's a regular daily enterprise for most of us, I would imagine. I mean, that's what a lot of the step work is about. A lot of meditation work is just healing and taking care of ourselves on a daily basis. So this is just, it's the essentially recognizing that there is this uh, relative or personal truth, and then there is also this universal truth, and we try to hold them in balance. So if we get too much into the personal, then we're just kind of completely lost in the story. If we just get into the universal, then we miss out, and we're not. That's where we get a spiritual bypass, where we're not really dealing with our shit. It's like, oh, I'm already enlightened. It's like I don't need to think about that. So yeah, I mean that's the dance. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I hope that's made some sense. Yeah, thank you. Other thought or question or comment?
Something off the topic.
Sure.
I was reading in step 6 about the great doubt,
Yeah.
and that's a positive thing. Yes.
Yes. Great
Yes.
doubt.
Okay. That's what it seems, that there's so much, like as you were talking about prayer, there are so many truths in so many different philosophies.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what it seemed to me the great doubt meant, was finding.
Yeah, and great doubt is also like remembering impermanence, so that we're remembering that whatever we think is going to happen might happen or it might not happen, And it's also like whatever I think the reason for things being the way they are might be true and it might not. It's really a state of humility, right? And openness, a real sense of like, wow, don't know,
Mhm.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That because that can keep you very awake, you most of the time we move through our lives assuming everything is just going to be the way it's going to be. And, as you're walking around your house, how often do you look really at stuff in your house, right? Because like, I know what's here. Uh, I did an exercise when I used to teach mindfulness in elementary schools. One of the mindfulness exercises I would say, okay, everybody look around this classroom and see if you look really carefully and see if there's anything in this classroom that you never noticed. And of course, there'd be a ton of things that they never noticed because you walk into class, there's my seat, there's the board, there's the teacher. Okay, got it, right? But you don't notice that little crack over there or that thing up in the ceiling. And what's that pipe coming down over there? And all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, if I pay attention, if I don't just assume that I know everything, um, a lot can be revealed. Yeah.
Thank you. More to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a little past 8. Friday night here in the Pacific time zone of the Northern Hemisphere. Well, I guess time zones are the same in the Southern Hemispheres too. But nice to see everyone. Yeah, I'll be back Tuesday morning, Pacific time, 10 a.m. And then next Friday will be a Spirit Rock night. So as I said, and I think that Angela put that information in there, but you can always find it on my website. If you don't know my website, it's kevingriffin.net. And so there you go. Have a safe weekend. I am tomorrow getting my second shot of Pfizer vaccine. Yeah.
Yes,
So
Hey.
good
we'll
stuff.
see. I'm expecting to be sick a little bit. It's quite possible. But if not, I don't know what I'll do, but I have a day of watching the NBA All-Star game will be my excuse for Sunday if I can be sick. So, all right, you guys, nice to see everyone.
right.
Thank you for coming. Take care of yourselves.